AITA for only paying for myself and my fiancé and future in-laws invited me to a NYE dinner at a scale restaurant. I, 32F, just got engaged to my fiancé, Sam, 37M, a few months ago. We had been together for a couple of years, and while we do not live together due to his family's deeply conservative Christian beliefs, our relationship has generally been good. His family is extremely religious, but they have always been kind and welcoming to me, despite some differences in our values and upbringing. They have a strong sense of community, and I have always appreciated that about them. However, there have been a few moments where their expectations, especially around money, have made me uncomfortable. This past New Year's Eve was supposed to be a special night for me and Sam. I had planned for us to celebrate together, just the two of us, maybe go out for dinner or do something intimate. But earlier in the evening, Sam called and told me he was going out with his parents for a NYE dinner celebration. I was a little disappointed since I had expected to spend the evening with him, but then, about an hour later, he called again and invited me to join them. I was genuinely happy and thought it would be a great opportunity to bond with his parents. So, I quickly got dressed and made my way to the restaurant. When I arrived, his parents greeted me warmly, and the atmosphere was lively and festive. They had already ordered multiple appetizers, drinks, and were deep into their conversation. Sam pulled out a chair for me, and his mother immediately started talking about how excited she was for the upcoming year, our engagement, and all the plans they had in mind. It was a great time, at first. As the evening went on, more and more food kept coming. His father ordered another bottle of wine, his mother called for a variety of desserts, and they were discussing what else they should try next. It was clear that they were indulging in the celebration, which I had no problem with, but in the back of my mind, I did start to wonder who would be covering this rather extravagant meal. I assumed that, given they had invited me, they had planned for this and were taking care of the bill. When the check finally arrived, the table went quiet for a brief moment. I instinctively reached for my bag and pulled out my wallet, assuming that we would be splitting it in some way. I looked at Sam and said, "I'll cover my portion." That is when things took an unexpected turn. Sam quickly mumbled that I did not have to do that since they had invited me, but there was an awkward pause that followed. His parents just stared at me before his father cleared his throat and said, "Oh, we didn't bring any money with us." His mother nodded and added, "Yes, we actually didn't think to bring our wallets." My eyes widened as I turned to Sam, who looked almost sheepish as he muttered, "Yeah, I forgot mine at home too." I was stunned. How do you go out to a fancy restaurant, order drinks, multiple rounds of food, and not bring away to pay for it? At first, I thought maybe it was a joke, but then his father chuckled nervously and said, "All right, so I guess we should let the doctor pay." I froze. Now, for context, I am a doctor, and while I do make a good salary, I have always been careful about my spending. I do not live an overly extravagant lifestyle, and I do not just throw money around for the sake of it. This was not the first time that I had been put in an awkward financial situation with Sam and his family. There had been previous instances where we went out, and they forgot their wallets or simply assumed that I would take care of it. Each time, I had been polite and covered it, but this time, the bill was ridiculously high. I looked at Sam, completely taken aback. "I can't pay for this entire meal," I said firmly. "This is way too much." His mother immediately looked offended. "Oh, but you make enough to cover this," she said, as if that justified them expecting me to foot the bill. Sam, now visibly uncomfortable, leaned in and whispered, "Babe, please, just do it. I'll pay you back later." That was when I snapped. I knew for a fact that he did not have the money to pay me back, and even if he did, this was a recurring pattern. It was never outright discussed, but there was always this expectation that because I had a high-paying job, I should take care of things, especially when it came to them. But I was not going to let that happen this time. I looked around the table and said, "I am sorry, but I am only paying for what I ordered. I did not agree to cover this entire meal, and I do not think it is fair that you expect me to." His father scoffed. "Wow. It's New Year's Eve. This is how you treat family?" His mother looked genuinely hurt. "We invited you. And now you're just going to embarrass us like this?" Sam, looking desperate, tried one last time. "Just do it, okay? Let's not make a scene." At this point, I was shaking with frustration. "No," I said. This is not okay. If you invite someone out, you either cover the bill or you make sure you can at least pay for yourself. You do not invite someone under the assumption that they will pay for everything, especially not without discussing it beforehand. The tension at the table was unbearable. His father muttered something under his breath about how disappointing I was, while his mother looked away in disgust. Sam just shook his head. Fine, he muttered, like I was the one being unreasonable. Without another word, I put down enough money for what I had ordered, stood up, and walked out of the restaurant. At around 2 a.m., my phone rang. It was Sam. The moment I answered, he was already yelling. He accused me of ruining the New Year's Eve celebration and making his parents suffer because I refused to pay. He went on and on about how I was selfish, how I humiliated them, and how I should have just done the right thing and covered the bill since I was financially capable. He even added, "I'll pray that your parents let this go and don't resent you for damaging your relationship with my family." That last comment really struck me. My parents have never raised me to be irresponsible with money, nor would they ever expect me to pay for an entire table of people who deliberately chose to go out without a way to pay. I felt sick to my stomach, not because I had refused to pay, but because of the blatant entitlement that had been thrown in my face. Even now, I am struggling with guilt. A part of me wonders if I should have just covered it to keep the peace, but another part of me knows that this was manipulative and unfair. If I had paid, I would have set a precedent that they could always rely on me to take care of their expenses whenever they forgot their wallets. So, am I the asshole? Update 1. After the New Year's Eve fiasco, things between me and Sam were tense. He eventually apologized, but the words felt hollow, more like he was sorry I had gotten upset rather than truly understanding why what happened had been unacceptable. He framed it as a misunderstanding, an unfortunate situation where I had overreacted. He tried to justify it, saying his parents were used to certain traditions, that they saw me as family, and that covering the bill should not have been such a big deal. It was clear that in his mind, the real issue was my unwillingness to let it go rather than his family's blatant manipulation. His parents, on the other hand, completely iced me out. No calls, no texts, no invitations for Sunday dinners like before. I could feel the shift in their treatment of me, like I had revealed something ugly about myself in their eyes. They had always been warm and welcoming, but now there was a distance, a quiet disapproval hanging in the air whenever Sam mentioned them. I knew what was happening, they were punishing me for standing my ground, hoping I would grovel and try to make amends. Weeks passed, and I found myself at a crossroads. Part of me wanted to address it head-on, to sit down and have an honest conversation with Sam about our future, but every time I tried, he brushed it off. He did not want to rehash old arguments. He kept saying things would smooth over if I just let time heal it, but I could not ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. This was not about one dinner or one bill. This was a pattern, a deeply ingrained belief that my financial stability somehow obligated me to take care of them. Then, one afternoon, Sam called and told me his mother's birthday was coming up, and they were planning a nice brunch to celebrate. He said this as if nothing had happened, as if we had not spent weeks in awkward silence. He told me he wanted me there, that this was a good opportunity to mend things. I hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed not to go, but I told myself I was being unreasonable. Maybe things really had blown out of proportion. Maybe this was a chance to show that I was still open to being part of the family despite our differences. So I agreed. The brunch spot was trendy, one of those upscale places where everything on the menu was overpriced but aesthetically pleasing. His mother had picked it herself, which already told me that they had not considered budget at all. When we arrived, his parents greeted me with forced politeness, like they were tolerating my presence rather than welcoming it. The air was thick with unspoken words, but I forced a smile and sat down, trying to push through the discomfort. Just like before, they ordered freely. Mimosas, specialty coffees, extravagant entrees, even extra dishes, just to try. I watched as plates piled up on the table, as they indulged without a second thought, and that familiar feeling of dread crept up my spine. I wanted to believe that after what happened on New Year's, they would not try this again, but the way Sam was acting, calm, unaffected, like everything was completely normal, made my stomach turn. I kept telling myself I was overthinking. Surely, they would not put me in that position again. Surely, after the argument we had, Sam would not let this happen. Then the check arrived. Just like clockwork, his father sighed dramatically and said, "Oh, we forgot to bring cash again." His mother laughed, leaning back in her chair as she waved a hand dismissively. "Well, it's my birthday, so I shouldn't have to worry about the bill anyway." I sat there, gripping the edge of the table, feeling the blood rush to my ears. My hands trembled slightly as I turned to Sam, hoping, begging, for some sort of acknowledgement that this was ridiculous. But when our eyes met, I saw nothing but that same expectant look, that quiet assumption that I would do my part. I snapped. I let out a short, humorless laugh and shook my head. My voice was cold when I finally spoke. "You've got to be kidding me." His mother blinked at me, as if she could not believe what she had just heard. "Excuse me? You planned this? You knew exactly what you were doing?" My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. "You didn't forget your wallets. You just assumed I'd pay again." His father scoffed and shook his head like I was the one being unreasonable. His mother crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "Well, I would think that someone who's going to be part of this family would understand that we take care of each other." Sam leaned in, lowering his voice, but his words still made my skin crawl. "Babe, don't ruin this. Just do it, we'll talk later." That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. It was not just about this meal or even the New Year's Eve dinner, it was everything. The entitlement, the manipulation, the complete disregard for my boundaries and my feelings. I had been excusing this behavior, rationalizing it, telling myself that maybe I was being too harsh, but the truth was staring me in the face. This was who they were. This was what they expected from me. And Sam would never stand up for me, because he was part of it. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor as I reached into my bag. I pulled out enough cash to cover only my portion of the meal, placed it on the table, and looked at Sam one last time. His expression shifted from expectation to shock, like he genuinely had not believed I would do it. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the restaurant. Update 2. For days, my phone buzzed constantly. Sam switched tactics, bouncing between guilt-tripping me and acting like I was overreacting. He told me I was being stubborn, that I had made a scene for no reason, that his mother was still devastated over how I had embarrassed her on her birthday. Then, his tone would shift. He would tell me he loved me, that he missed me, that we just needed to talk and clear the air. It was manipulation at its finest, and I could see right through it. I ignored every call, every message, letting them pile up unanswered. The space between us grew, and the longer I stayed away, the clearer my mind became. Then, a few days later, I got a text from his older sister, Emma. Emma and I had never been particularly close, but she had always been polite to me. Unlike the rest of her family, she seemed a little more modern in her thinking, a little more independent. When I saw her name flash across my phone, I hesitated, then opened the message. "Hey, I need to talk to you. I think you should know something." Curious, I agreed to meet her for coffee. There was an urgency in her words that unsettled me, and when I arrived at the small cafe we had chosen, I found her already sitting there, waiting. She looked hesitant, almost conflicted, but there was something else too, pity. A look I had seen before, but never directed at me. She wasted no time getting to the point. She told me that what had happened at brunch, and at New Year's, wasn't an accident. It wasn't forgetfulness or an unfortunate coincidence. It was deliberate. A test. A calculated attempt to see whether I would take on the financial burden they expected of me. Their family believed that a good wife should be financially supportive, especially for a man of faith like Sam. Their entire worldview revolved around the idea that men led the household spiritually, while women handled everything else, including finances. I stared at her in stunned silence as she explained that they had done this before, most notably with Sam's ex-fiancée. She had failed their test just like I had. She had pushed back, had refused to pay for them, had put up boundaries. And, just like me, she had suddenly found herself the villain in their narrative. The reason things didn't work out. The reason she wasn't wife material. It was never about the money itself. It was about control. It was about seeing if I would bend, if I would sacrifice without question, if I would accept their unspoken rule that my role in the relationship would always be that of a provider. I felt sick. The realization hit me all at once, rushing through my body like a cold wave. Every moment, every strange look, every entitled assumption suddenly made sense. They hadn't been caught off guard when I refused to pay. They had been disappointed. Because in their minds, I had failed. I had shown them that I wasn't the kind of woman they wanted for their son. I wasn't someone they could manipulate, someone they could depend on to keep them comfortable while Sam played the role of a devoted, but financially useless, husband. Emma sighed, looking almost regretful as she admitted that she had been waiting to see if I would figure it out on my own. But after seeing how badly things had spiraled, she felt like she owed it to me to tell me the truth. I could see it in her face, this wasn't easy for her. But she wasn't like them. She had learned to break free in her own way, even if she still stayed within their orbit. I left that cafe in a daze. My entire relationship felt like a lie. Every moment I had spent questioning myself, wondering if I had overreacted, if I had been too harsh, if I should have just gone along with it to keep the peace, it all evaporated. The truth was clear now. I had been set up from the very beginning. When I got home, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at my phone. Then, with a deep breath, I called Sam. The moment he picked up, his voice was careful, like he knew something was coming. I asked him directly. I laid it all out, the test, the manipulation, the way his family had orchestrated these situations just to see if I would take on the role they wanted. I expected him to deny it, to be horrified, to tell me that Emma had misunderstood. But he didn't. He sighed, like this conversation was exhausting for him. Like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. Then he said the words that sealed everything for me. "Babe, you make so much money. It's not a big deal." That was the moment I knew. I ended it. Update 3. Breaking up with Sam was both painful and liberating. There were moments when I questioned everything, moments when the weight of ending something so serious and long-term made me second-guess myself. But those moments were fleeting. Every time doubt tried to creep in, I reminded myself of the truth. I had spent years loving a man who saw me as a paycheck, who had stood by while his family manipulated me, who had let me believe I was the problem instead of confronting the entitlement that had been ingrained in him. His family did not let me go quietly. His mother sent a text about how I had thrown away a wonderful man, painting me as the villain who had ruined everything. His father left a voicemail, his voice dripping with condescension, telling me that I would regret this when I realized no man would ever love me the way Sam did. As if love was measured by how much financial burden I was willing to shoulder. As if being seen as a provider first and a partner second was something I should have been grateful for. But guess what? I did not regret it. The weeks that followed were a period of quiet rebuilding. I reconnected with friends I had unknowingly distanced myself from while drowning in that relationship. I took time for myself, indulged in things I had neglected, books, hobbies, solo coffee shop visits where I could just sit in silence without someone else's expectations weighing on me. The relief of not having to navigate the minefield of Sam's family's financial games was something I had not realized I needed until I was finally free of it. A few months later, when I felt ready, I started dating again. I was cautious, hesitant to put myself in another situation where I might end up being taken advantage of. But then I met James. James was different from the very beginning. There was no financial mind game, no expectation, no entitlement. Just mutual respect. It was effortless in a way I had forgotten relationships could be. The first time we went out to dinner, he insisted on covering the bill and jokingly said, "I promise I won't fake forgetting my wallet." The comment was light-hearted, teasing, but it hit me harder than I expected. I laughed, genuinely laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt safe in a relationship. There was no anxiety, no quiet panic in my mind bracing for the moment when I would once again be expected to carry the weight of everything. James never made me feel like my financial success was something to be exploited. If anything, he admired my independence, respected my boundaries, and, most importantly, never once made me feel like my worth was tied to my bank account. As for Sam, I did not hear much about him at first. The occasional mutual acquaintance would bring him up in passing, but I had stopped actively looking for updates. He faded into the background of my life, a past chapter one had no desire to reopen. But then, one evening, I was out with a friend when she leaned in and said, "Oh, by the way, did you hear about Sam? He's dating someone new." It did not surprise me. Sam had always been the kind of man who needed someone to take care of him, to validate him. But then she added, she's a lawyer. Super successful. And that gave me pause. I knew exactly what was happening. He had found another woman with a great career, another woman who could be tested, molded, worn down until she believed it was her responsibility to take care of him. Another woman who, if she was not careful, would end up sitting across from his family at a dinner table, staring at a bill she never agreed to pay while they watched in judgmental silence. I could only hope she figured things out sooner than I did.